Hi, I'm Sam Roberts from Roberts Geospatial Engineering. In a previous video, we did some LiDAR gridding and created some terrain and bathymetry rasters. So in this video, we're just going to take a look at those from the perspective of sea level rise. So I have ProRaster open, and we want to display two rasters. So we need to create an algorithm that will display two different rasters. There's a couple of ways to go about it, and we're going to do the whole thing manually. So let's get started. What I need to do is first identify these rasters as raster sources. So I go to the raster source editor, and I'm going to add a new raster source. I need to give it a unique name, so I'll call this one Central Coast DTM, and then I'll go and select a file. Excuse me. Terrain. So there's my raster. Have a preview of it there. Now I'm going to add a second raster source. This one will be Central Coast DBM, which is the bathymetry data. Hit tick. Just browse to that file. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. There's the raster we want there, and that's what it looks like. So, okay, I've added two new raster sources. Now I create a new algorithm, so I add a new lookup table algorithm. And I'm going to need two layers, so I'll add another layer, another lookup table color layer. Now the order that these things are listed on the screen is top to bottom. So on top, I want the highest quality data. So I go to the color component and I'll choose my bathymetry, which is the highest quality. And then I'll go to the next layer down and I'll choose the DTM. So you can see on the screen here that I've now got those two rasters rendered at the same time. But there's a distinct boundary between them because the color mapping for those two rasters is independent. So we need to use the same color mapping for both of them. So I go into the color page and I'm going to use a color table that I set up before. And this is a color table that has a map built into it. So I'll select that and then I go to the data transform and I select it as the data transform as well. And I need to do that for both layers. So I'll go into here, select the color table, find it in the list of data transforms, and voila, we have our raster. And now you can see that you can't see the boundary between those two rasters because the colors are the same, and so there's no longer any visible difference. So that's the first way to achieve it. Let me just show you another way to achieve it, which is simpler. So I'm going to delete that algorithm. I'm going to go into my raster source editor. So a raster source is not just a raster. It can be multiple rasters. So this time I'm going to put both of those rasters into a single raster source. So I'll add a new raster source and I'll give it a name. So I'll call it Central Coast DTM DBM. And then I'll go in and add the rasters. Now, in this case, I need the rasters ordered from lowest quality to highest quality. So we're going to go for the terrain raster first. And then I'm going to add the bathymetry raster. And you can see there the preview of those two files that we have in the raster source. So hit OK. Now I can create a lookup table algorithm, go to my color layer, and I'll choose that new raster source which has two rasters in it. So with a single layer, I've now achieved what I did before with two separate layers. So in this case, where we just have two rasters, it probably doesn't make a big difference. But if you have 100 rasters, then that raster source concept is very powerful. It allows you to use a single layer and to apply those properties to 100 different rasters all at once. which makes it very efficient to work with a large number of rasters. And the rules state that the rasters that you put into a raster source all need to be similar. Now, the first thing is the coordinate system. They must all share the same coordinate system. That's a rule. That's not a restriction throughout the rest of the algorithm structure. You can use different rasters of different coordinate systems everywhere. But within a raster source, they should all have the same coordinate system, and they should all have the same field and band structure, so that if you go to field 1, band 6, then it's going to be the same kind of data in every raster within that raster source. Apart from that, they don't have to have the same cell size, they don't have to be exactly the same, but they're all expected to be similar by the system. So now we'll come in and we'll just change the color table again. And there you go, we've got the same result that we had before, but this time using a single layer linking to a raster source that has multiple rasters in it. Okay, so let's look at this data from the perspective of sea level rise over the rest of the century. And we're not going to do any detailed analysis, we're just going to zoom around and have a look and see if we can see which areas might be vulnerable. So I'm just going to close that preview window and then open a separate map. Bring it up here. Now, just zooming in, the color scheme that we have is blue up to 0 meters RL, and then it's white up to 2 meters RL, and then it goes into this green color. So we're looking at the white areas and the green areas as being of particular interest, because they're going to be vulnerable. So starting down the southern end of the coast, you have the Woy Woy Peninsula, and it's this big blob of green. Now you can see that there are paleo beach sand dunes all the way through the Woy Woy Peninsula. So I guess that this beach has just been advancing over probably thousands of years to get to the position where it is today. And I wonder whether with sea level rise, that advance will cease and it will start to retreat. Now, all of this entire peninsula is less than about 5 meters above sea level. So I think that's a tick for vulnerable, and there's a heck of a lot of housing in that area, so that's interesting. Now, zooming in, this is in Brisbane water. So we go past St. Hubert's Island. I think that's a artificially constructed island, and you can see that it's mostly white with some green, so it's mostly below 2 meters above sea level. I'd say that's fairly vulnerable. And then just interested in this suburb here. This is Davistown, this peninsula here and all around here. There must be $1 billion worth of housing in Davistown, and as you can see, the entire thing is below 2 meters above sea level. In fact, most of it is below 1 meter above sea level, and it's already vulnerable. I mean, if you have a king tide with a storm surge or something, then you already have flooding in Davistown. So that's already a hotspot on the Central Coast. But it's just interesting that you have this big blob of green here. So this section here so this section is all above sort of 2 meters. It's more like 3 or 4 meters, a little bit higher than the rest of Davistown. And this is the retirement village. And right next to it is the local bowling club, the RSL. So there's the bowling greens there, and there's the building. So, you know, life goes on even once the rest of Davistown has gone under. The old folks in the retirement village will still be able to potter next door to the club and buy some tickets for the meat raffle and get themselves a schnitzel with gravy. So that's good news. And going out, let's come out here onto the coastline. So now we're out on the Pacific coastline, and this beach is called Terrigal Beach. And you can see that There's nothing between Terrigal and the open ocean. So the Pacific Ocean is just barreling in here, and this is a good surf beach. But it's also a beach that's entirely dominated by wave action. So it's all about waves and it's all about water level. And this little spit of sand here, which sits in between the Pacific Ocean and the Terrigal Lagoon, just so happens that on this tiny little single sand dune that runs along here, people have decided that this is the spot to build some of the coast's most expensive housing. And this is already a climate change hotspot. There's been significant damage to the houses, to some of the houses that have been built along this section of the sand dune, already significantly undermined. And of course, they're calling for a seawall to be built along here to protect these houses. But looking at the scale of the ocean compared to the scale of this little sand spit, you just wonder whether a seawall is going to protect this area. And it's a goner. So maybe it wasn't such a smart choice to build $8 million houses on this little sand dune. And of course, it goes on all up and down the coast. I suppose another hotspot would be along the lake here. This is connected to the ocean, and all these houses along the lake are very close to sea level, only below 2 meters above sea level. And in fact, all of these suburbs, Berkeley Vale and Wamberal and so forth, are all at significant risk. Long Jetty, all at significant risk from sea level rise. So that's it for this video. As I said, just a bit of a peruse of the data and no rigorous analysis, but I hope you find it interesting.